In the 41st millennium, humanity has forgotten what it means to fight for freedom. They fight for survival, for the Emperor, for 10,000 years of bloody stalemate against a universe that wants them dead. But what happens when someone who learned to fight for something more, for the right to simply live, falls through the cracks of reality into this endless war? The skies above Mordian Prime burned with the familiar crimson of orbital bombardment. Nothing unusual. The world had been contested for 3 years, its hive cities ground to rubble and rebuilt as fortresses, then ground down again. Commissar Valen stood in the forward trench, laser gun in hand, watching his men hold the line against the heretic advance. Disciplined, unyielding, expendable. The warp rift opened without warning. No Geller field breach, no psychic scream. Just a tearing sound like reality itself splitting at the seams. And a figure fell through the impossible wound in space, small, dark-haired, spinning in freefall with geometric precision. Metal cables erupted from devices at his hips, hooks biting into the trench wall. Gas hissed. The figure's trajectory bent at an angle that violated physics, and he landed in a crouch between 2 shocked guardsmen, blades already drawn. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Levi Ackerman assessed his situation with the cold efficiency of someone who'd spent years fighting monsters. Wrong sky, wrong architecture, wrong uniforms. The soldiers surrounding him wore flak armor and carried laser weapons he didn't recognize, their eyes wide with a fear he understood, the fear of something that shouldn't exist. Behind them, the trench stretched in both directions. Crude but functional, mud and sandbags reinforced with sheets of corrugated metal. "Stand down!" Commissar Valen's voice cracked like a whip. His bolt pistol came up, aimed at Levi's head. "Identify yourself, mutant!" Levi's eyes, cold, grey, calculating, fixed on the commissar. He didn't understand the language, but tone was universal. His blades remained ready, ultra-hard steel gleaming dully in the firelight. Not the crystalline hardness of monomolecular combat knives, but sharp enough, always sharp enough. "I don't know where I am," Levi said in a language none of them recognized, "but point that weapon somewhere else." A guardsman lunged. Poor discipline, born of panic. Levi moved. The ODM gear hissed again, cables retracting and firing in a sequence that yanked him sideways along the trench. His blades flashed twice. The guardsman's laser gun clattered to the ground, barrel severed clean. Levi landed behind him, one blade at his throat, the other pointing at Valen. "I said," Levi repeated slowly, "somewhere else." Valen's tactical assessment took 1.3 seconds. Unknown Xenos or mutant. Inhuman speed. Weapons technology inconsistent with known patterns. Threat level, immediate. His finger tightened on the trigger. The heretic artillery chose that moment to find their range. The shell screamed over the trench and detonated 30 meters behind the Imperial line. Shrapnel shredded 2 guardsmen instantly. The concussion wave threw Levi forward, his grip on the soldier releasing as training overrode confusion. He hit the trench wall, assessed the new threat, and his expression hardened with recognition. War. That, at least, was universal. "Incoming!" A sergeant screamed redundantly, Men scattered for cover. Another shell landed closer, collapsing part of the trench. Valen was shouting orders, trying to restore discipline, but Levi had already moved. His ODM gear carried him up and over the trench lip, in defiance of the covering fire doctrine that kept Imperial Guard pinned down. From Valen's perspective, the small figure became a blur of motion against the burning sky. Cables shot out, anchoring to ruined structures, and the figure actually flew, across no man's land in arcing parabolas that should have drawn every enemy weapon. Tracer fire reached for him. Las bolts burned the air, but he moved like water, like wind, like nothing Valen had ever seen outside of an Astartes in full assault. Levi's eyes tracked the artillery positions by muzzle flash and trajectory. 3 emplacements dug into the rubble of a collapsed factorum 200 meters ahead. Heretic crews. He could see their corrupted armor, the blasphemous symbols that meant nothing to him except enemy. The ODM gear was running low on gas. He'd need to make this count. He dropped from his arc into a spinning dive, cables redirecting his momentum. The first gun crew didn't see him until his blades were already cutting. Not the neck, armor too thick there, but the gaps, joints, throat seals, weak points learned from fighting 15-meter monsters translated efficiently to human targets. 3 dead in 2 seconds. The second crew turned, autoguns blazing. Levi was already moving, his Ackerman instincts reading their firing patterns before conscious thought. He wove through the bullets, blades singing, and 2 more heretics fell with arterial spray painting the twisted metal of their gun. The third crew abandoned their artillery and charged with chainswords screaming. Levi met them head-on. To the Imperial guardsmen watching through magnoculars, it looked like a dance. The small figure moved between larger opponents, blades finding flesh with surgical precision, never stopping, never hesitating. When the last heretic fell, the figure stood among the corpses, breathing hard but controlled, blood dripping from his weapons. Then the ODM gear sputtered, out of gas. Levi looked at the empty canisters, then at the Imperial trench line 300 meters away across open ground. His jaw tightened. He started walking. Las fire from the heretic positions reached for him. He dodged, rolled, kept moving with the brutal efficiency of someone who'd learned survival in the hardest school. By the time he vaulted back into the Imperial trench, 3 guardsmen were dead from the covering fire, but the artillery had gone silent. Commissar Valen stared at him, at the blood, at the empty ODM canisters, at eyes that held no fear, only cold assessment. "What?" Valen said slowly. "In the Emperor's name, are you?" Levi looked at the dead guardsmen, at the survivors holding the line, at a war that stretched beyond any horizon he'd known. He sheathed his blades. "Someone who's tired of watching people die," he said in words they still couldn't understand. But his meaning was clear enough. The command bunker smelled of recycled air, machine oil, and the sharp tang of fear poorly concealed. Levi stood in the center of the ferrocrete chamber, hands bound with metal restraints that felt crude compared to the technology he'd seen in the trench. 6 guardsmen surrounded him with laser guns trained on his head, their fingers nervous on the triggers. Commissar Valen sat across a battered table, his bolt pistol within easy reach, studying the stranger who had killed 9 heretics in under a minute. Between them lay Levi's equipment, the ODM gear, disassembled with the reverent confusion of men encountering technology they couldn't classify. The gas canisters, empty. The blade hilts with their broken tips. He'd burned through 3 sets of blades in that assault. The grappling mechanisms, still functional. Their chemical propellant system analyzed and found wanting by Mechanicus standards, but undeniably effective. "You understand me now," Valen said. It wasn't a question. The Scholastica Psychana lexographer had spent 2 hours in Levi's presence, a sanctioned psyker whose mind brushed against his thoughts just enough to build a linguistic bridge. Levi had felt it, an invasive presence that reminded him too much of things he'd rather forget. But he'd allowed it. Information was survival. "I understand you treat your soldiers like ammunition," Levi replied, his voice flat. 3 men died because you wouldn't give covering fire when I crossed back. 3 men died performing their duty," Valen corrected. 60 men live because you destroyed those artillery positions. This is the mathematics of war, stranger. The Emperor demands sacrifice. The Emperor! Levi's eyes narrowed. Your religion kills your own people. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. 2 guardsmen shifted their aim fractionally. To speak against the Emperor was heresy. To question the Imperial creed invited execution. Valen's hand moved to his bolt pistol, not drawing it, but establishing presence. "Choose your next words carefully," the commissar said softly. "I have executed men for less." Levi met his gaze without flinching. "Then you've executed men for telling the truth. Where I come from, we fought to protect people, not to spend them. Where you come from no longer exists." Valen leaned forward. "This is the Imperium of man, humanity's last bastion against Xenos, heretics, and demons. We number in the quadrillions across 1,000,000 worlds. And we are still losing. Every world we hold costs billions of lives. Every year we fight is bought with oceans of blood. Your idealism is a luxury this universe cannot afford." For a moment, Levi said nothing. He thought of walls falling, of titans breaching defenses, of desperate gambles that cost everything. He understood sacrifice, but there was a difference between necessity and waste. "I saw your soldiers," Levi said quietly, standing in formation while artillery zeroed in on their position. No evasive maneuvers, no tactical flexibility, just standing there, waiting to die because someone told them discipline meant immobility. It means holding the line. It means dying for no reason. Levi's restraints clinked as he leaned forward. "Give me my gear. Give me resupply. I'll teach your men to move, to fight, to survive long enough to actually win battles instead of just dying slowly." Valen actually laughed, a bitter, exhausted sound. "You think we haven't tried? The Astra Militarum is built on doctrine refined over 10,000 years. Guardsmen who break formation die. Guardsmen who improvise create gaps in the line. Individual heroics mean nothing when you're holding against a tide that never stops. Then why am I still alive? The question hung in the air. Valen had no answer, because the stranger's point was undeniable. Individual skill had accomplished what 50 guardsmen could not. Before the commissar could respond, the voxcaster crackled to life. "Command, this is Overwatch. We have contact. Multiple signatures inbound from Imperial airspace. Thunderhawk pattern, Astartes." Every man in the bunker went rigid. Space Marines. The Emperor's Angels of Death, here. Valen stood slowly, his expression shifting from interrogator to subordinate in an instant. "They're coming for you," he said to Levi. "Whatever you are, you've drawn their attention. Pray to whatever gods you believe in, that they judge you worthy of service, rather than execution." "I don't pray," Levi said, "and I don't serve anyone." "Then you don't understand what's about to happen." Valen moved to the bunker entrance, his hand on the door release. The Adeptus Astartes are humanity's finest warriors. Gene-forged super soldiers created from the Emperor's own genetic template, each one worth 1,000 normal men. They are beyond you in every measurable way. Levi's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes, a memory of being told Titans were invincible, that humanity would fall, that resistance was meaningless. He'd heard speeches about impossible enemies before. "We'll see," he said. The bunker door opened. Firelight from the burning horizon silhouetted 3 figures descending from the sky on pillars of exhaust flame. Even at this distance, their size was wrong. Too large, too heavy, moving with precision that defied their bulk. Midnight blue armor trimmed with bone white, chapter markings Levi didn't recognize. They touched down 50 meters from the bunker, and the ground shook. The lead figure stood 8 feet tall in his power armor, a walking tank with a human shape. His helmet turned toward the bunker, sensor arrays focusing with predatory intent. When he spoke, his voice carried through external vox speakers, deep and resonant with transhuman authority. "I am Brother Sergeant Theron of the Nightwatch chapter. We have detected a temporal anomaly centered on this position. Surrender the xenoform for questioning, Commissar. This matter is now under Astartes jurisdiction." Valen saluted crisply. "At once, my lord." He turned to his men. "Bring the prisoner." Levi watched the Space Marines approach, calculating angles, measuring distances, assessing weaknesses in armor joints that might not exist. His hands flexed against the restraints. The ODM gear was 20 feet away, disassembled but salvageable. One of the Astartes tilted his head, studying Levi with enhanced optics. "Small," he observed. "Fragile. Yet the Commissar's report claims significant combat capability." "I've killed bigger things than you," Levi said evenly. Brother Sergeant Theron's helmeted head cocked slightly, a gesture of curiosity or perhaps amusement. "Have you now?" The restraints broke. Levi moved. The restraints had been ceramite reinforced, rated to hold a combat servitor. Levi snapped them through sheer leverage and Ackerman enhanced strength, metal shrieking as the locking mechanism failed. He was already moving before the pieces hit the ground, his body angling toward the table where his gear lay disassembled. Brother Sergeant Theron's response was immediate. Transhuman reflexes sent him forward in a blur of midnight blue ceramite, power-armored gauntlet reaching to intercept. But Levi had fought monsters who moved faster than human perception. He read the angle of Theron's approach, twisted mid-stride, and slid beneath the grasping hand. His fingers closed on an ODM gear handle. The housing was detached from the gas mechanism, useless for flight, but the cable spool still functioned. He triggered it instinctively. The grappling hook shot across the bunker, wrapped twice around a support beam, and Levi yanked himself sideways as a bolt pistol round cratered the ferrocrete where he'd been standing. "Stand down!" Theron's voice carried the weight of divine authority, the kind of command that made ordinary humans obey without thought. Levi kept moving. His blade hilts were 3 meters away, too far. He improvised, snatching a fallen laser gun from a dead guardsman's hands and firing twice at the bunker's lumen strips. Darkness flooded the chamber. Not complete. Firelight still leaked through the entrance, but enough to matter. The Astartes helmet displays compensated instantly, switching to thermal imaging. They saw Levi as a heat signature sprinting along the wall, impossibly agile, using terrain like a 3-dimensional combat space. One of them raised his bolter, tracking the signature, finger tightening on the trigger. Theron's hand pushed the barrel down. "Alive, Brother Marcus. The Inquisition will want answers." That hesitation cost them 2 seconds. Levi reached his blades, the familiar weight settling into his hands like extensions of his own body. The broken tips didn't matter. He'd fought with worse. The cables spooled back into the damaged ODM housing with a mechanical whine, and he assessed his situation with brutal clarity. 3. Astartes, 7-foot-plus frames augmented to transhuman capability. Reaction times enhanced by genetic modification and neural implants. Armor that could shrug off anti-tank weaponry. Strength enough to crush his skull with a casual grip. And gaps. There were always gaps. "You're fast," Theron admitted, his voice almost conversational as he advanced slowly. "Faster than any unaugmented human should be. But this ends one way. We are the Emperor's finest." Levi attacked. He came from above, using the last dregs of gas in his ODM gear to launch himself at the ceiling beam, then rebounding downward at Brother Marcus from an angle the Astartes hadn't anticipated. His blades targeted the neck seal, the vulnerable joining point between helmet and chest plate. Marcus blocked with armored forearm, ceramite meeting steel with a shriek of metal. The impact should have shattered Levi's weapons. Instead, his blades, forged to cut Titan flesh, scored deep grooves in the sacred armor. Marcus stumbled backward, genuinely surprised. Levi landed, rolled, came up spinning as the 3rd Astartes, Brother Cain, swung a combat knife the size of a short sword. The blade passed through empty air. Levi was already inside his guard, using the Space Marine's own bulk against him, driving an elbow strike into an armor joint at the hip where flexibility met protection. Not enough to penetrate, but enough to stagger. "Throne of Terror," Cain breathed. "He fights like he's killed things that could end him with a single mistake." Theron finished. His bolt pistol remained holstered. Instead, He drew a combat blade, the weapon crackling with disruption field energy. "Enough testing. Brother Marcus, flank left. Kane, contain." They moved as a unit, 3 transhuman warriors executing tactical doctrine refined through centuries of warfare. Levi read their coordination, recognized the tightening net. The bunker was too confined. He needed space, angles, anything to prevent them from leveraging their superior strength. He triggered his ODM gear one last time, the mechanism screaming in protest, gas pressure far below operational standards. The cable shot toward the bunker entrance, hook biting into the doorframe. Levi flew through the opening in a controlled tumble, cables detaching as he hit the ground outside and rolled to his feet. The trenches stretched in both directions under a sky painted with artillery fire. Guardsmen stared in shock as the small figure burst from command headquarters pursued by 3 Astartes. Commissar Valen emerged behind them, shouting orders no one could hear over the ambient roar of war. Theron stepped into the firelight, his armor's servo motors humming with barely restrained power. "Impressive," he called across 10 meters of corpse-strewn mud. "You have skills worthy of a scout marine, but you cannot win this. Our armor is blessed by the machine god. Our strength is the Emperor's gift. Our purpose is divine." "I don't care about your religion," Levi said, breathing controlled despite the exertion. His ODM gear was dead weight now, gas completely exhausted. Just blades and reflexes, like the old days. "I care about not being a prisoner." "Then you care about an impossibility." Theron began walking forward, his brothers matching his pace. "We are the Adeptus Astartes. We have broken Xenos empires and cast down demon princes. What makes you think?" Levi moved first, exploiting the speech, the assumption that he would wait for the tactical disadvantage to worsen. He sprinted forward at an angle, feinting toward Theron before cutting hard toward Marcus. The Astartes pivoted, bringing his bolter to bear. Too slow. Levi was already airborne, using a ruined sandbag as a launch point, bringing both blades down in a 2-handed strike at the bolter's barrel. The weapons met with a shower of sparks. The bolter's sanctified barrel cracked, and Marcus dropped it reflexively. But Theron was there, armored fists swinging in a backhand that would pulverize bone. Levi twisted desperately, the blow grazing his ribs instead of connecting fully. Even the glancing impact sent him flying 3 meters, slamming into a trench wall hard enough to crack the sandbags. Pain exploded through his side, cracked ribs, possibly broken. He forced himself upright, blades ready, vision slightly doubled. The Astartes closed in, methodical and patient now that they'd landed a solid hit. "Yield," Theron ordered. "You've proven your worth. Now prove your wisdom." Levi spat blood into the mud. "Not my strong suit." Then the voxcaster on Theron's armor crackled with a new voice. Feminine, cold, absolutely authoritative. "Brother Sergeant, this is Inquisitor Voss. I am 3 minutes from your position. Do not kill the anomaly. I want him intact for questioning. Immobilize only." Theron's posture shifted fractionally, acknowledgement and frustration combined. "Understood, Inquisitor. The Emperor's will be done." He looked at Levi, and for the first time, his tone carried something like respect. You heard the Inquisitor. This can end with your cooperation or your unconsciousness. Choose. Levi's grip tightened on his blades, weighing his options against the pain in his ribs and the approaching roar of an inquisitorial transport. The Inquisitor's transport touched down like a falling cathedral, repulsor engines screaming, armored ramps slamming into mud still warm with guardsmen's blood. Inquisitor Kayla Voss emerged in a swirl of crimson robes and gun servitor escorts, her augmetic eye glowing amber in the firelight. She was tall, thin, her face bearing the kind of scars that came from surviving things that killed everyone else. "Secure him," she ordered without preamble. Levi considered running. The Astartes were spread in a loose containment formation, watching him with the patient focus of apex predators. His ribs screamed with every breath. The ODM gear was scrap metal, but his blades were still sharp, and he'd fought through worse odds. Voss's organic eye fixed on him with unsettling intensity. "You're calculating your chances. Admirable. Futile, but admirable." She stepped closer, ignoring the possibility of violence with the confidence of someone who'd faced down demon princes. "I've read Commissar Valen's report, watched the picked footage. You killed 9 traitors in under 90 seconds, using equipment the Mechanicus cannot classify and techniques no human should possess. Where I'm from, that's called doing your job," Levi said. "Where you're from no longer applies." Voss gestured, and a servo skull floated forward, Auspex sensors whirring. "You are not chaos touched. My sensors would detect corruption, not Xenos. Your genetics are baseline human, albeit with anomalous mutations. Not a psyker. You register null on the warp sensitivity spectrum. You are an impossibility, and the Imperium does not tolerate impossibilities. So what? You kill me? Eventually? Perhaps." Voss smiled thinly. "But first, you prove yourself. The Imperium has use for skilled killers, especially ones who can move like you do. Brother Sergeant Theron has proposed a trial by combat, single engagement against one of his Astartes. Full combat parameters. If you survive, we discuss your future. If you don't," she shrugged, "the Emperor provides." Levi looked at Theron, who inclined his helmeted head slightly. "It is not unprecedented," the Astartes said. "The Imperium has welcomed warriors from feral worlds, death worlds, even renegade Xenos on rare occasions. Prove you can stand against the Emperor's finest, and you earn consideration rather than immediate execution. And if I refuse, then I declare you a heretical anomaly and order your termination," Voss replied flatly. "Be grateful I'm offering this option. Most Inquisitors would simply have you lobotomized and turned into a servitor." The casual cruelty of it struck harder than any blow Theron had landed. Levi had fought authoritarian regimes before, survived military bureaucracies that ground people into paste. But this was different. The Imperium didn't just demand obedience, it erased everything that made you human if you failed to comply. "Fine," he said. "I'll fight, but I need equipment. My gear is destroyed." Voss gestured to a waiting Mechanicus tech priest, its mechadendrites clutching a bundle of components. "We've fabricated replacements based on your design. Compressed gas canisters, promethium-fueled for extended operation, grappling cables reinforced with adamantium threading, and blade sets, monofilament edges, 60 units. Our forges worked through the night." The tech priest placed the bundle at Levi's feet, binary cant clicking from its Vox grill. The ODM gear was close, not perfect. The weight distribution felt slightly off, the trigger mechanisms cruder, but functional. The blades gleamed with lethal promise, sharper than anything his world had produced. "Who am I fighting?" Levi asked, strapping the gear into place with practiced efficiency. "Me," said Brother Marcus, stepping forward. The Astartes removed his helmet, revealing a face carved from granite and scarred by centuries of war. His eyes held no malice, only professional assessment. "I volunteered. You scored my armor, a feat few enemies accomplish. I would test whether it was luck or skill." The makeshift arena was a cleared section of trench, 40 meters in diameter, ringed by sandbags and watched by 200 guardsmen who should have been manning defensive positions but couldn't resist witnessing this. Levi stood at one end, checking his gas pressure and cable tension. Marcus stood at the other, armed with combat knife and bolt pistol, his armor gleaming despite the gouges Levi had carved. Inquisitor Voss raised her hand. "Engagement parameters. No lethal force against Brother Marcus. His armor will protect him, but I forbid targeting life support systems. Levi Ackerman, you need only survive 10 minutes or force the Astartes to yield. Are the terms clear?" Both combatants nodded. "Then, in the Emperor's name, begin." Marcus moved first, his transhuman physiology launching him forward in a ground-eating sprint that covered 5 meters in a single stride. Levi triggered his ODM gear, cables shooting towards sandbag anchors, yanking him up and sideways in an arc that kept him just ahead of Marcus's reaching grasp. The Astartes adapted instantly, his bolt pistol tracking Levi's trajectory, firing 3-round bursts that chewed through the air. Levi twisted mid-flight, his enhanced reflexes reading the bolt patterns, cables redirecting him in a corkscrew spiral that made targeting impossible. He descended on Marcus from a sharp angle, blades aimed at the shoulder joint. Marcus caught one blade on his armored forearm, the monofilament edge screeching against ceramite but not penetrating. His other hand moved with shocking speed, fingers closing on Levi's ankle mid-strike. The grip was iron. Levi felt bones grind together, the pressure threatening to shatter his leg. He didn't hesitate, reversed his free blade, and drove it into the flexible joint at Marcus's elbow. Not deep enough to wound, but enough to trigger pain receptors even through Astartes augmentation. Marcus's grip loosened fractionally. Levi twisted free, triggering his cables to yank him backward, landing 15 meters away in a controlled crouch. His ankle throbbed. He couldn't afford many mistakes like that. "You're learning?" Marcus observed, his tone almost approving. He holstered his bolt pistol and drew his combat knife, the blade crackling with disruptor energy. "Most opponents panic when grappled. You adapted. Good." Levi didn't waste breath on responses. He studied Marcus's stance, the way his weight distributed, the micro-adjustments in his posture. The Astartes was testing him, probing for weaknesses. 2 minutes down. 8 to go. Marcus charged again, but this time Levi was ready. He used the vertical space, launching himself at a sandbag wall, rebounding at an angle that put him above and behind the Astartes. His blades targeted the backpack power supply, not to destroy it, but to force Marcus into defensive rotation. The Astartes spun with impossible speed. For something so massive, his knife carving through the space where Levi had been. But Levi was already gone, cables pulling him into a spiral pattern that made him nearly impossible to track. He struck twice more, quick slashes at knee joints and hip servos, testing armor integrity, mapping weaknesses. Marcus laughed, a deep, genuine sound. "You fight like the Eldar, all speed and evasion." "I fight to win," Levi corrected, breathing hard now. The gas was depleting faster than expected. 5 minutes remaining, and he couldn't maintain this pace much longer. Time to change tactics. Levi dropped the evasion pattern. Instead of dancing away from Marcus's next charge, he angled directly toward it, cables firing at the ground to accelerate his forward momentum. The Astartes, expecting another retreat, adjusted too late. Levi slid beneath the sweep of Marcus's combat knife, both his blades driving upward into the vulnerable hip joint connection. The monofilament edges found the microscopic gap between armor plates, not deep, maybe 2 centimeters, but enough. Hydraulic fluid sprayed in a thin mist, and Marcus's right leg seized momentarily as servo motors compensated for the breach. The Astartes recovered in less than a second, but Levi had already moved past him, using Marcus's own bulk as cover from any supporting fire. He came up behind the Space Marine and drove both blades into the exhaust ports of the backpack power unit, not to destroy it, but to foul the heat dispersion system. Warning runes flashed across Marcus's helmet display. Internal temperature rising. Not critical, not yet, but compromising. The Astartes spun with a backhand that would have decapitated a normal human. Levi dropped flat, felt the displacement of air as the ceramite fist passed overhead, then rolled and triggered his cables to pull himself away. 6 minutes elapsed. Both combatants breathing harder now, though Marcus's transhuman endurance gave him a decisive advantage in any prolonged engagement. Levi's ribs screamed with every movement, and he could feel his body accumulating damage from near misses and partial impacts. But Marcus was slowing. The hip servo damage forced micro-adjustments in his movement. The overheating backpack made him ration his power armor's enhanced strength. Small advantages, but Levi had learned long ago that battles were won by exploiting incremental gains. "Impressive," Marcus admitted, circling now with more caution. "You fight like you've studied Astartes' combat doctrine." "I've fought things bigger and faster than you," Levi replied, conserving breath. "Just needed to find your weaknesses." "We have no weaknesses." But there was a flicker of uncertainty in Marcus's voice now. The absolute confidence of the Adeptus Astartes meeting something it couldn't easily categorize. Levi attacked again, this time using a feint pattern. Cables. Shooting toward one anchor point, then redirecting mid-flight to another, creating an unpredictable movement vector. He targeted Marcus's helmet sensors, twin blade strikes, aimed at the optic arrays. Marcus blocked with his forearm, but the distraction created an opening at his neck seal. Levi's blade stopped 1 millimeter from the vulnerable flesh, the monofilament edge resting against the flexible joint. A killing blow, held back only by the trial's restrictions. "Yield," Levi said quietly. For 3 heartbeats, Marcus didn't move. Then slowly, the Astartes lowered his combat knife. "I yield." The watching guardsmen erupted in shocked silence that was somehow louder than cheering. An Astartes, an angel of death, one of the Emperor's finest, had yielded to an unaugmented human. It violated everything they understood about the Imperium's hierarchy of might. Inquisitor Voss stepped into the arena, her expression unreadable. 7 minutes. 42 seconds. You forced a space marine to concede defeat through tactics, speed, and precision exploitation of armor vulnerabilities. She studied Levi with her augmetic eye, data streams flickering across her retina. The Officio Assassinorum would kill to recruit you. The Inquisition would benefit from your skills. Even the Astartes themselves might consider you for specialized training. Levi removed the ODM gear harness, his hands steady despite exhaustion. "I'm not interested in recruitment." "That," Voss said coldly, "is not an option. You exist within the Imperium now. You serve, or you are eliminated. There is no third path." "Then we have a problem." Voss's hand moved to her plasma pistol. Brother Sergeant Theron stepped forward, his posture tense. Even Marcus, still catching his breath from the combat trial, shifted his weight toward a combat-ready stance. "Before this escalates," a new voice interrupted, "perhaps we should discuss what happens when you try to force a weapon to serve against its will." Everyone turned. An officer stood at the arena's edge, not Astra Militarum, but something else. His uniform bore markings Levi didn't recognize, and his face held the weathered look of someone who'd made too many hard choices. Behind him stood a squad of soldiers in carapace armor, their weapons lowered but ready. "Colonel Harren," Voss said, her tone ice. "This is inquisitorial business." It was, Harren agreed, until your trial by combat drew the attention of every ranking officer within Vox range. Word has spread, Inquisitor. An unaugmented human defeated a space marine in single combat. Do you understand what that means to the common soldier? To the billions of guardsmen who are told they're expendable precisely because they lack transhuman advantages? "It means nothing," Voss snapped. "It was a technical victory in a controlled scenario." "It means hope," Harren interrupted. "Something this Imperium desperately needs, and you want to lock him away or execute him because he won't bow to authority?" He looked at Levi. "I'm offering an alternative. Join my regiment as an independent contractor. Train my soldiers in your movement techniques. In exchange, you get autonomy, resources, and protection from inquisitorial overreach. The Inquisition's authority supersedes yours," Voss warned. "In matters of heresy, yes. But this man has been tested and found clean. You said so yourself. No chaos taint, No Xenos corruption. No Psyker signature. He's just a skilled soldier who refuses to be a slave. Last I checked, even the Imperium allows for independent operatives when they serve humanity's interests. The standoff stretched. Levi watched the political maneuvering with the same cold assessment he'd used in the combat trial. Voss wanted him as a controlled asset. Harren wanted him as an example and training resource. The Astartes probably wanted him as a curiosity to study. None of them wanted him as a free agent. "I have a counter-offer," Levi said into the silence. "I'll train your soldiers, Colonel. I'll fight your battles. But on my terms. I choose which operations, which objectives. And if I see your Imperium sacrificing people for no tactical gain, I walk. No threats, no executions, no servitor conversion. You either accept that I have principles, or you try to force me, and we see how that works out." Voss's finger tightened on her plasma pistol. "You dare!" "He dares because he can," Marcus interrupted, surprising everyone. The Astartes removed his helmet fully now, his scarred face thoughtful. "Brother Sergeant Theron, I request we advocate for the Colonel's proposal. This warrior fights with honor and skill. Forcing such a one into unwilling service breeds resentment and betrayal. Better to have him as an ally than a prisoner who escapes at the first opportunity." Theron was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "The Night Watch chapter supports Colonel Harren's proposal. Inquisitor Voss, you have your confirmation of the anomaly's capabilities. Surely the Ordos can accept this compromise." Voss's jaw tightened. Political calculation flickered behind her eyes. Astartes' support carried weight even an Inquisitor couldn't easily dismiss. "Conditional acceptance," she finally said. "The anomaly serves under Colonel Harren's command, but remains subject to inquisitorial oversight. One hint of corruption, one sign of treachery, and my authority supersedes all agreements. Understood?" "Understood," Harren said. Levi looked at the blood-stained arena, at the soldiers watching with expressions caught between awe and fear, at a universe that measured human worth in ammunition expended. He thought of walls, of sacrifices, of choices between bad and worse. "I'll do it," he said. "But the first time I see your people treated like disposable trash, I'm gone." "Then pray you never see an actual war," Voss replied coldly. The order came 3 weeks later. Hive Tertius, population 6 billion, suspected chaos cult operating in the lower levels. Standard Imperial response. Orbital bombardment. Cleanse the entire hive, rebuild later. Collateral damage. Acceptable. Timeline. 48 hours before the Navy arrived to execute exterminatus protocols. Levi stood in Colonel Harren's command tent, staring at the tactical display with cold fury building in his chest. "You're going to kill 6 billion people because of a cult in the Underhive? We're going to cauterize a cancer before it spreads," Harren corrected, though his tone carried no conviction. "Chaos corruption is absolute. One cult becomes 10, 10 becomes 100. Within a year, the entire hive could fall to the ruinous powers. The Imperium cannot take that risk. So you kill everyone. The innocent with the guilty. There are no innocents in a corrupted hive." Inquisitor Voss stood in the corner, her augmetic eye gleaming. The warp spreads through proximity, through exposure, through the mere knowledge that corruption exists. Every citizen of that hive is potentially compromised. Mercy to the few endangers billions on surrounding worlds. Levi's hands clenched. 3 weeks of training Harren's soldiers. 3 weeks of watching Imperial doctrine grind people into paste. 3 weeks of biting his tongue while men died for inches of worthless ground. He'd told himself it was necessary, that he could make a difference from within, that small improvements mattered. But this wasn't small. This was genocide with a bureaucratic signature. "There's another option," he said quietly. "Let me go in, find the cult, eliminate the leadership, extract before the bombardment. You save 6 billion lives and still remove the threat." "Impossible," Voss said flatly. "The cult is in the underhive. 300 levels of labyrinthine corridors, toxic waste, and hostile gangs. Even if you could navigate it, you'd never locate the cult in 48 hours. And even if you did, one man cannot eliminate an entrenched enemy force." "I've done it before. Against Xenos? Against Titans? Yes, I've read your debrief." Voss's voice dripped contempt. "This is chaos. Reality itself bends to their will. Demons manifest from belief. Corruption spreads through thought. You have no defense against such things." "Then give me support. A squad. People who know the hive." Harren exchanged glances with Voss. "The only ones who know the underhive are the Arbites, local enforcers who've been trying to suppress gang violence for decades. They've lost 300 men to the lower levels in the past year alone. They won't volunteer for a suicide mission. Let me ask them." 20 minutes later, Levi stood before 12 Arbites, hard-eyed enforcers in carapace armor, faces scarred by 100 underhive raids. Their sergeant, a woman named Kara with a bionic arm and burn scars covering half her face, studied him with open skepticism. "You're the one who beat a space marine," she said. "Not a question." "I'm the one who's offering you a chance to save your hive instead of watching it burn," Levi replied. 48 hours. Take me to the cult. I'll handle the rest." "You don't understand what you're asking," Kara said. "The underhive isn't just dangerous, it's hell. Toxic air, collapsing structures, mutant gangs, and now chaos cultists performing rituals that make reality scream. My people have died down there. Good people. More will die if we do nothing." Levi met her gaze steadily. "I'm not ordering you. I'm asking. Help me try." Kara looked at her squad. Something unspoken passed between them. The look of people who'd already accepted death and were just choosing how to meet it. "We know where the cult is," she finally said. "Level 293, Old Factorum District. But getting there means going through Scar Alley, 5 kilometers of gang territory where our patrols don't return. And even if we reach the cult, they've got hundreds of followers and at least 3 sorcerers we've identified. Then we move fast, hit hard, and extract before they organize." Levi checked his ODM gear, fully supplied now, gas canisters charged, blade sets pristine. "I need 2 things from you, local knowledge and covering fire. I'll handle the rest." "You're insane," one of the Arbites muttered. "Probably," Levi agreed. "But I'm also the best chance those 6 billion people have." The descent into the underhive took 6 hours. Elevator shafts that hadn't been maintained in centuries, service tunnels choked with chemical runoff, levels where the darkness was absolute and the air tasted of rust and decay. Levi's enhanced senses passed the environment with practiced efficiency, but even he felt the oppressive weight of the place. This wasn't poverty. This was abandonment. Millions lived here, forgotten by the Imperium above, surviving in conditions that would kill most humans within days. Kara's squad moved in tight formation, their shotguns and stub guns ready. They'd lost the bravado of surface soldiers. Down here, every shadow was a threat, every sound a potential ambush. But they moved with competence born of bitter experience. "Scar Alley ahead," Kara whispered, her vox cutting through the ambient drip of toxic condensation. 3 major gangs control it: the Rust Prophets, the Ash Eaters, and the Hollow Men. They'll hit us the moment we enter their territory. "Let them," Levi said. "We're not here to fight gangs. We go through, not around." The gangs came screaming from the darkness, augmented thugs with crude bionics, feral children wielding sharpened rebar, mutants whose bodies had twisted in the chemical miasma. They expected fear, hesitation, the usual Arbeit's response of careful advancement and suppressing fire. They got Levi instead. His ODM gear launched him into the vertical space above the ambush, cables finding purchase on rusted pipes and corroded girders. He moved through the gangers like a scythe through wheat, his blades finding throats and major arteries with surgical precision. Not cruelty, efficiency. Every second counted. The Arbeits followed in his wake, their weapons barking as they cleared corridors he'd already secured. Within 8 minutes, they'd crossed 3 kilometers of territory that usually took patrols days to navigate. Bodies lay in their wake, but the bulk of the gangs had simply fled, unwilling to face something that moved like a demon but struck with human purpose. "Throne of Terror," one of the Arbeits breathed. "Is he even human?" "Human enough," Kara replied, though her voice carried uncertainty. "Just more." They reached level 293, 18 hours into the mission. The Factorum district sprawled before them, vast chambers where manufactories had once produced goods for the hive, now converted into makeshift temples. 8 pointed stars covered the walls in dried blood. The air thrummed with a sound just below hearing, a psychic pressure that made normal humans nauseous. In the central chamber, 300 cultists knelt before their sorcerers, chanting in a language that hurt to hear. Levi watched from the shadows, assessing numbers, positions, threat priorities. The sorcerers were the key. Kill them, and the cult collapsed into leaderless rabble. The assault lasted 4 minutes. Levi struck the first sorcerer before the cultists even registered his presence, blades severing the connection between channeled warp energy and physical form. The backlash tore through the ritual circle, collapsing the summoning before it could manifest. The second sorcerer turned, screaming invocations that bent reality. But Levi had fought impossible odds before, and faith didn't stop monofilament edges from finding flesh. The third sorcerer managed a defense, warp fire erupting in a wall between them. Levi didn't hesitate. He triggered his ODM gear, using the vaulted ceiling to arc over the flames, descending with both blades aimed at the cultist's exposed neck. The strike was clean, final. Without their leaders, the cult shattered. Some fled into the Underhive's depths. Others surrendered to Kara's Arbites. By the time the 48 hours expired, Inquisitor Voss stood in the ruined Factorum, staring at 300 prisoners and 3 dead sorcerers. "You saved the Hive," she said, her tone unreadable. 6 billion lives preserved because you refused to accept necessary sacrifice. "There's no such thing as necessary sacrifice," Levi replied, exhaustion pulling at every word. "Just choices. You chose the easy answer. I chose to try." Voss was silent for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she nodded. "Perhaps. The Ordo Hereticus will reassess our protocols for cult containment. Your methods have merit." She turned to leave, then paused. "But understand this, Levi Ackerman. You won today because fortune and skill aligned. The next hive, the next cult, may not yield so easily. The Imperium's brutality exists because 10,000 years have taught us that mercy kills as surely as the bolter." "Maybe," Levi said, looking at the Arbites celebrating quietly, at the hive levels above that would wake tomorrow, unaware of how close they'd come to annihilation. "Or maybe you've just forgotten what you're supposed to be protecting." He walked toward the surface, leaving Voss with her certainty and her doubts. The 41st millennium was darkness, brutality, and endless war. But even in the deepest darkness, one soldier with the will to fight could change everything. Some battles were worth fighting, even when the Imperium said otherwise. The Emperor protects. More stories await.